So I'm going to share with you my ultimate guide to learn any language from the perspective of someone who didn't know how to speak any Japanese to the level that I'm at now.
仲良くなかったけど、大人になってからもう一回お父さんと仲良くしたいと思って。
でもそれも東方、方の方向の方。
東の。
Right. So I didn't use any books, no teachers, I just used the internet. So first of all, why X language? Why Chinese? Why Japanese? Why Spanish or German? Those are just languages that I wanted to learn at some point. I even told myself I was going to learn 15 languages, which I made a video about actually. But it doesn't have to be that unrealistic as it seems to be, because it might be possible that you only want to reach certain level, let's say only an A1 level in all of these languages. Now maybe you're someone who gets interested in a language pretty quickly, which is totally fine, but you might end up just looking at the language, looking up some grammar and then having no interest in it at all anymore, which is totally fine. That might happen. I would actually encourage you to try out any language and then see if you like it. Now whatever the language is, the first thing that I would do, what I didn't do but I would do now, is set a proper goal. So why? What is the end goal with this language? I have these 3 languages that I speak at different level. One is German, which I can casually speak in. I can have a normal conversation. Then the other is Japanese, which my goal is to be able to understand the language really well. And then there's Mandarin, which my goal is to just have a basic conversation, I guess. When I started out with Japanese, I didn't have any goals at all, and I realized that because of that, there were times where it was really difficult for me to find motivation, and so I quit at certain points, and that cost me a lot of time. I spoke about that in this video as well. I would really recommend you to have a solid goal. Now, once you got your language and your goal, you're probably going to want to find some resources to start studying. Now, first of all, there's 2 ways to study. One of them is learning a lot, having a lot of books and input, and just learning a lot from those. The other one is more like a natural way to learn, which is just listening and just listening. Basically how you learned your mother language, which is just listening to people around you, how the language is being used in context, and then learn the language, which is not with any grammar or anything. Now the reason that I mention this is because I think this is potentially a really great way to learn a language, and I'm experimenting with that at the moment. But in this video I'm going to explain the more traditional way, which is, well, using books and other resources. So as for books, what I did for learning Japanese is I didn't use any books. Like I said, I just went on the internet. I went to YouTube and I found a series, 90-ish, well at the time only 50 videos, and I used those videos to study Japanese. And the reason I stick to those videos is because I really liked the person who made those videos, and eventually I started learning some grammar, and so I learned basic Japanese grammar. You can try books as well. I mean, the person who made these videos is actually an author of a series of books. I didn't buy those, I just watched the videos. But if you want to buy a book, that's fine too. The only disadvantage I think it has is that books can be quite boring, and I think videos are way more entertaining. So that's why I would recommend you watch videos or just use the internet in general, because there's so much grammar to be found on the internet. Sure, you can use apps as well, like Duolingo or Rosetta Stone or whatever, but personally I really don't like those, because it's more like memorization. If you look at Duolingo, they mostly teach you phrases, and I guess they do teach some grammar as well. They have these like little explanations, but it's mostly just memorization in my opinion, which language is not about memorization, it's about communication, and it's more like a natural way of thinking. It's like an instinct. You know how to say something, not because you have to think about it or because you have memorized it before, but because you know how it is said. It's like an instinct, which does not come from memorization. So once you got your resource, I would suggest that you get a solid foundation first. Once you have a solid foundation, then get rid of the grammar explanation type of resources and just go on to native input. Now a tip that I would like to give on grammar is that don't get stuck on it. For example, in Japanese there's this wa versus ga particle usage that a lot of people, including me at some point, struggle with, but it's not worth thinking about too much, because eventually, like I said, it's like an instinct and you will get it anyway. If you listen enough to the language and how these things are being used, the grammar, then you'll get a feeling for it. So if you get stuck on something, then just move on, and maybe when you encounter something like it again, then go back, read it, try to understand it. If you still don't understand it, just move on. Language is made up of 2 things. One of them is grammar, the other is vocab, and if you put those together, that's a language, kinda. Personally, what I'm doing right now with Japanese is I'm learning the most used words. Now, like I said, I don't really like memorizing things, and vocab especially is easy to just try and memorize, make flashcards, whatever, or use an SRS system. The way I see vocab is, it's like planting a seed. So if you got your flashcards and you look at them and there's a word that you haven't seen before, then you learn the word and then you don't think about it for a while, but there's a seed planted in your head, and then once you do encounter it, preferably in any context like native material, then you can make a connection and say, hey, I know this word because I saw it when I was learning my vocabulary. So I combine learning vocabulary with flashcards, not really flashcard, but a flashcard system, an SRS system. So if you look at a diagram like this one, you can see how an SRS system makes you more likely to remember a word. So if you combine a flashcard SRS system with native material that uses the language in context, then I think this is the best way to learn vocabulary. Now next up is speaking. And obviously when you want to learn a language, most people want to learn how to speak the language, right? So it's really dependent on your goal. Maybe you're just trying to read the language because you need it for some reason. You need to know how to read the language. And I would say there's basically two opinions on this. One is speak from the start, practice speaking and try to speak as much as possible. Don't be afraid. And there's also the kind of people that wait until the end, until they understand everything, and then they slowly try to speak. Personally, I am the second category of people, and honestly, I do believe if you look at the natural way to learn a language, when you were a baby, you didn't speak at all. At first, you were just exposed to the language, and after, I don't know, months, years, you started to speak slowly but surely, and it started to make sense. I think this is a really powerful way to learn how to speak, because you can be more confident and more comfortable when you have already listened to thousands of hours of this language. Now, whether this really works or not is still, like I said, an experiment that I'm working on. I'm trying to learn another language with this way. However, if you're not like an introverted person like me or shy at all, or don't mind speaking from the start, then try to speak from the start. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Just if your goal is to speak, then obviously you gotta speak. So now we've talked about the grammar, the vocab, speaking, and now the other thing that I mostly do, and I would say is one of the most important things, is immersion. Now there's a reason why immersion is so powerful and important, and that's because it's basically replicating the process of you acquiring your mother language. For example, I'm learning Japanese right now. I try to watch Japanese videos and series and YouTube videos, and when I watch these in Japanese, I find that there are times when I see a word or a grammar and it just makes sense. Like maybe I didn't really know how it's used, but when I see it used in a natural way by Japanese people, it just makes sense. And these are the moments that are the most powerful to learn the language. Now, context is only 50%. The other 50% is repetition. So if you're immersing and you learn something, or something makes sense and you remember it, then you need repetition. And the more times you see something like that, the more likely you are to remember it. The stronger that connection becomes in your head. Apparently you need like, I don't know, let's say 40 repetitions in order for that connection to be so strong that you don't need to think about it anymore. And that's what you want, to have the language be like a reflex, like an instinct, not having to think about it. So please try to immerse as much as possible. At first it's really difficult, but once you know the foundation, I would say just try out some immersion. Try watching videos or listening to music or anything in your target language. And like I said, don't worry when you don't understand something, just move on and keep learning, and eventually you'll find things that make sense. Now my next tip is about habits, because so Japanese has these kanji, right, these characters, and I realized that I do want to know how to read them, because when I'm reading any text and there's just one kanji, I always have to think, what does this mean? And that's just really frustrating. So I decided, yes, I want to learn all the common kanji. I want to be able to understand most of the Japanese text that I'm reading. So there's this website called Wanikani that teaches you kanji using the SRS system that I just explained. If you don't do your reviews every day, then your reviews pile up and it becomes a hassle, and you'll have to do more than 100 reviews every day. Now the point I'm trying to make is that if you are trying to learn a lot of things, it's important to take it slowly and make habits and create habits out of it. For example, every day when I wake up, I try to do my kanji reviews, and I try to make a habit out of it. Because if you're just learning randomly whenever you feel like it, then you're not going to make a lot of progress. Like, just try to learn for 5 minutes a day, and you'll probably end up spending 15 minutes learning every day, which is still doable. 15 minutes every day is not bad. Try to create a habit and really learn every single day. Now my final tip, and this one is optional, is to track your progress. Because once you reach the intermediate level, that is, if you even want to become this proficient in a language. It becomes really difficult to progress, to make any more progress, because it's hard to look back and see what you've already learned. And so it might be useful to record yourself and try to speak the language, or to just write down some things that you learned. And I didn't do this, and so what ended up happening is I had this idea of how good I was with the language in my head, whereas when I was trying to actually speak it or speak with people or whatever, I wasn't as good as I thought, and so I had a little conflict in my head, and it was frustrating, and it demotivated me, so I didn't learn, and then of course I didn't make any progress, etc. My tip is to track your progress so you can see where you came from, how you didn't know anything at first, but now you know quite a lot about this language. So yeah, those are my tips that I would give anyone if you were trying to learn a new language. Hopefully you can use these tips to learn another language. Let me know which language you are going to learn, you want to learn, and then hopefully I'll see you in another video. Bye bye.